All right, welcome to the Optime demo. Today I will go over the scheduling and staffing and operations aspect of the uh, technology here. Um, so just to level set those watching, everything in the Optime technology is modularized. So up here in the top, you can see a variety of different what we call modules, and dependent on the user, dependent on the need for that organization or company, we can very easily turn on or off different modules. And within each module is a whole bunch of different sub areas and settings, view, edit, delete, right, share, all those different types of things. Again, in the user management aspect, which is in the admin module, manage users, manage roles, we can customize all that pretty quickly for different types of employees, specific employees, and so on. Today I will spend most of the time in credentials, schedule, and staff, and also in the what the employee would see for their login. They have both the web application and they have a mobile app that they could use to do all the same functions. One thing that I like to say in any video is around this information module. So one of the great things about Optime is we don't need a lot of information through, we do get a lot of data through Excel files, CSV, etc. But as far as setting up an entity or a corporation, facility, unit, whatever it happens to be, it's quite easy to do that from the front end. With that aspect, if we're talking about a healthcare need, you can easily customize everything you would want for any specific unit, job skill, type of employee, as minutia as it can go, right? So let's say a registered nurse can work in a tech role, but a tech can't work in a registered nurse role, right? So you can set that up in substitutions. Let's say certain units and certain job skills represent their weekend as a Friday night and a Saturday night as opposed to a Saturday night and a Sunday night. Both are easily possible and can be set up here, along with all their holiday patterns, weekend rotations, swapping shifts, swapping preference shifts. If they have a specific holiday, for instance, let's say one user has to work on Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever it happens to be, they can preemptively, 6 months out, get someone to swap with them, and the schedule will pick up that swap once both sides agree to it, and the manager if needed. Okay, so that's kind of the groundwork of the modules and some of that specific information on setting up individuals directly in the system. Let's kind of get started. So before I leave this screen, I'll get back to Smart Staff, but there are 5 different ways to see the schedule. I'm in this overview screen. Doesn't look too fancy here because it's actually one particular unit, and that unit happens to be accurately staffed. If there was a mismatch of over or under, it would show me the values and the hours that those values are showing over or under staffing. We like to say throughout the application, we're trying to reduce misalignment to 0, meaning the absolute values per hour of overstaffing or understaffing both are not good, right? We want them all to be 0 or as close to 0 as possible. So if we're overstaffed, that's not good. If we're understaffed, that's also not good. So we like to talk about misalignment and getting everything as close to 0. So this would very quickly tell us if we had one unit, 8 units, multiple facilities showing here. We could, they'd have each their own tile, and we could see in total where they're overstaffed, or I could tap on one in particular tile and see the overstaffing for that particular tile if the, on a per hour basis. And additionally, you'll see some green, yellow, and red throughout the demo. That is like a threshold of how much misalignment is occurring on that particular date, or for that particular person, or for that particular shift. And just because I won't come back to it, you can actually customize those thresholds on a per user basis. So if you have a really strict unit, right, and you have to be very close to the 0 misalignment, you might want greens to only show up at, plus or minus 2%, and maybe yellow plus or minus 5%, and then everything greater is red. If you have a more neutral unit where it is a little bit more scaled back, you could leave it as the default configuration, but again, it is all customizable to the user, and they could choose to adjust that as at their choosing. Okay, so let me get started in the schedule scenario, and I will bring up a demo schedule that was created. This is all demo data, so don't get too hard pressed on anything that you are seeing in particular. I think there'll be a whole bunch of red coming up here right now, but don't. That's, again, it's just kind of a demo. Let me go through the wizard. So a lot of the more complex tasks in the Optime product are what we call go through a wizard, right? A step process. It allows a user, particularly like a novice user, to digest a small amount of information, finish it, then go to the next step rather than being bombarded with 80 things to choose from at the first step. First step's pretty easy here. We're just defining the schedule we're wanting to create. I have to give it a code. Usually I just name the code and the name the same thing, but it's basically what units are you working with and what time frame are you working for. It's how I typically like to do it, but anyone can relate it and set up however they want. And then what time frame are we running this for? It could be as minimal as a week. It could be as large as you would want it. You could do it for a quarter at a time if you felt like it. Typically, people fall into 4 to 8 weeks, but again, it's completely up to the person making the schedule and who's in charge of that. It's the system itself is agnostic to what that need is. Then you could specify which facilities you're creating the schedule for, and of those facilities, which units you're creating the schedule for. I'm just doing a simple one facility and one unit within that facility. Max consecutive hours is kind of used throughout. Each individual employee has some customizations to that, which I'll show you. And here on this per schedule basis, I could say that nobody can work more than 12 consecutive hours, right? If they're 12 hours employee, meaning that the model will not schedule them for double shifts. Again, usually the employee preferences kind of take that into consideration, but you could also set it here if you need to. Usually I just leave it at its default, which makes it null essentially. And the bread and butter of the model are these 4 options. So if I choose to make a schedule that is solely employee preferences, it's not going to look at the demand. There are use cases for this for certain types of units. It might be a lot more operational chaos to get it fluently as low misalignment as possible, but it is a possibility and people do use it. So this is solely employee preference. This is not looking at employee preference and doing just basing it solely on data and trying to reduce the misalignment as much as possible. Again, getting the over and understaffing reduced down to as small a value as possible. And then we have 2 middle grounds. Where you take employee preference first and then also minimize misalignment, or you take minimize misalignment as the dominant need and then also factor in some degree of employee preferences. Usually in the real world, we use one of these bottom 2 options for most facilities and units. Now I will go to define template, the second step. So this brings in the census and the forecast that we would have already ran in our strategy and strategy session, and then gets pumped into weekly recommendations and daily recommendations. This is automatically fed in. If for whatever reason I want to rerun it because I got a new feed of ADT, admit discharge transfer data, or different census or workload data, I could rerun it and it will make micro adjustments based off of that. And then there is usually a template also from the strategy that kind of follows that says how much staff are needed based off of that weekly demand needed. And this gets separated out on a per shift basis per day, but it's a template based largely on the strategy, which again would be held in a different demo that talks all about how that gets incorporated and how those models run. And there's various models that run through the strategy. So I would run that. I get edit template. So here I get my concrete amount of need on a per shift, per day, per job skill basis for all the units and facilities I'm working with. Usually we don't have to do much with this screen, but again, let's say that a certain type of tech is not going to be available for a night shift and it's a small unit, and that demand's not going to be filled. Maybe you want to make the 2s to a 1, right? It's not the most advantageous thing to do. It's just, again, we're allowing it to happen because we could see that actually happening in the real world rather than just getting stuck on creating all this demand that you can't fill. It allows this adaptive process along the way. The next step is of the more important. So here are all the shifts for a given unit and the job skills pertaining to them. If I were to tap on one, it will show me the in total list of providers that could possibly work in this unit. If I wanted to filter out to all the full-time people, I could do that through all of the column filters here. I could find people specific to that unit, right? If I just put in comp, it'll show me all the people. I can access their preferences from here through the pencil icon, or I could go into their profile from tapping on their name. This gives a little pop-up modal that allows me to customize anything. Let's say I'm looking here and I notice this person is on a wrong weekend rotation or a holiday rotation, and this is going to be a holiday schedule. I can make the change on the fly before the model runs, so I don't have to go in and make all the minutia changes in the actual schedule. Just kind of saves time that way. But the benefit here is I could go through before the schedule runs and make sure that everyone that is appropriately needing to be scheduled gets scheduled. And if I need to dissect someone out or put them to a different unit, I could do it from this screen as well. Again, it's just a high level, very good view of seeing what's going on before the schedule gets created. Then I can optimize or go to the next step. That would be view results. This is where we're going to get a lot of red, but again, it's just demo data. That's why it looks the way it does, just because the way I had ran it. And it will give me, the schedule essentially. If I also want to, I could hit the summary here. This will tell me some large scale information of how many people were scheduled, what the total misalignment looks like, overstaffing, understaffing, and a whole bunch of different criteria. Again, this is helpful because if something looks drastically off, I could exit out, go back to select providers, or define template, make some adjustments, rerun the optimization, and then get to a more solid state before I conclude with the schedule creation. Okay, so after creating the schedule, then nobody sees it. They don't see it. I can create as many schedules as I want without people seeing it. Nobody will see it until I post it. And this one's already posted. Posting basically means that the administrators or managerial staff have access to it. The staff currently do not. Okay. And what happens now, if I go to schedule by calendar, is we get the schedule. This is just for the month of May. This is one I've kind of spruced up a little bit more from the scenario that we were looking at. You see that they're all green. Again, the green, yellow, red. It's based off those thresholds. And again, the users cannot, the end users, the staff cannot see it yet. They can't see it until I publish it. So if I were to go to publish, it'll get me a modal. I could select certain days and units and shifts that I want to publish or don't want to publish if I want to hold off for certain weeks, for example. But once I publish it, then the staff see it. They get notifications. They can go in. They can start, requesting overtime or all those different dynamics and go from there. So again, this is another one of the schedule screens. I showed you overview. This is scheduled by calendar, where if I'm looking at maybe one or two units, it's great let me just open this up. Let me see if there's any exclamation marks. So exclamation marks are basically warnings that can show up. There don't appear to be. So things that might generate that is if someone's working an overtime shift, if someone's working on more than their employee preference for days in a row. Like let's say someone only wants to work 3 night shifts in a row and the schedule we have them on has 4. The 4th shift would get a warning. Other options they can do here is you can undo the last action, which you don't do a whole lot, but you don't realize how much you wish you had an undo until you don't have one, just because maybe this is all drag and drop. And let's say you make an action, you don't know what loaded, but you could always undo to see what the last action was, decide whether you want to keep it or not. You can also refresh the conflicts and tags. So if there are warnings that are showing, you fix it. You could refresh it to make sure that the warning goes away. There are a couple of other things. So over here, these are what we call tags. This is very small bits of information. So if I were to highlight it, it will tell me exactly what it is. This is the charge for this shift. This is just an example. But if I were to right click on any one of these people, every facility company, unit can have different tags that they find important. You can record orientation and preceptors here. You could even record orientees nested within the preceptor, so they actually show up with a little indentation, and we can have them count for or against the demand. Because sometimes an orientee, let's say they're on orientation for 8 weeks, they might be unencumbered, right? And they might just solely be orienting for the first 4 weeks or so, and then they start to take maybe a half patient assignment load and then a full patient assignment load in the last 2 weeks. It's important to know that as far as how the supply relates to the demand, and so being able to do that within the system is quite helpful. Other things you can see here. The pink shift means that this is an overstaff shift. If I were to highlight it, it says 3 filled, 2 demand. So I can maybe see if someone wants the day off, or move them over to a day that might have a need, or a different unit that has a need if they have those capabilities. And this one is posted, meaning if this is now published, the staff go in, they can see all the posted shifts of all the available openings that they can actually sign up for. They could put their name to it, and then we can go and approve them to work that overtime. Or if they're part-time or per diem staff, they would just be able to get the shift. And that's actually held up here in this requirement posting area, where we can manage it. We can also manage it directly from the schedule here. If I were to tap on this, it gives me another modal, and I can follow the process as well. But up here, the other cool thing about postings is it can set so let's say you have one posting and 4 people have signed up to want to work it, right? In different units and different companies and different environments, it could be drastically different on who should get that shift. And instead of having the staffing person always decide that, and if they're deciding that 10 times a day, it's bound to make mistakes, right? So we can align this in information so that the person that should get the shift shows up at the top, right? It shows like a list of people. The person that should get the shift shows up at the top, and that could be for financial reasons. They are the lowest cost to be able to pick up that shift. It could be because of union agreements or other types of agreements that the staff members have with the facility. Or a variety of other reasons. Like it could be like hours worked, right? So maybe they aren't the lowest cost, but they also don't have any hours yet. They're per diem or something. They need to make up their per diem requirements. They could get the shift that way. So it does that for you without the person like myself in here trying to decide who gets every single posting. We also have integration with agency technologies like VMS softwares, where if we want, basically, usually the way it works is all the postings, right? We leave them open in the system for the staff of the hospital or facility to sign up for let's say a week or two, and maybe there's 7 to 14 days before the shift is actually occurring. If it's still open, then it publishes automatically to those VMS technologies. They get that on a pretty instant basis of what the needs are and those updated needs as they change along the way, because again the facility staff might still pick it up, and if they find a candidate to work it, they can submit them, and then they can come directly into this scheduling software automatically. And so we've worked out two-way integration with a variety of different VMS technologies. That actually works quite well. It's usually not a necessity for people that don't use a lot of agency, but there are certainly companies and facilities that have a very heavy agency usage for certain types of job types. Primarily, one example I remember is like sitters. This place needed like 20 sitters per shift, and they just can't staff to that. It's an overwhelming amount of additional people that could change drastically on a needed basis. So we set up that two-way VMS technology for them, and they found it very heavenly because they didn't have to deal with the minutia of sitters. They could focus more on the other job types that is more concentrated to the supply and demand that they're needing to focus on. Additional other things that they can do, there's a ton of reports. If there's not a report here that people care about, or the one that they find an additional need for, it is not hard to create a new report. The one that I love is the call report. So basically, if I were to select a given date, unit, shift, and job type, and run the call report, it'll tell me all the people that are not actively working, that wouldn't put them into too many consecutive hours that aren't on vacation or LOAs or anything like that. Just the people that can actually work that shift. And I don't, it gives you a roster of their name, some basic information, and then their phone number or email. But you don't even have to use that. You could press one button, it'll text all of them, or send them a push notification to their mobile app if you want to do it that way as well, and say, hey, are you available to work tonight? We need someone else, and they can reply back to that text or open the push and sign up for the shift. But they can reply back to the text saying sure, or a 1 or a 2 to signify that they want to work, and then they can get plugged in automatically. So it saves a tremendous amount of chaotic minutia that occurs as people do daily staffing, thinking 24 to 48 hours before the shift is occurring. There's other things around here. It tells you how many people are actively working the shift. The other variables tell you people that are available. Any over or under staffing shows up there as well. We do have, not in the demo environment right here, but there is also from strategy the recommendations, so the expected census, right? As the live census comes in, it will show up here in the top right. It tells you what it is for the day and the night shift. And let's say today is the middle of the afternoon of the 5th. It'll tell you the actual census that occurred for the morning shift, and it will show you in gray what the expected census is for this unit on the evening shift. And then it does that for 7 days into the future, so you can constantly keep up to date with what the expected census is going to be. And that's real time. We update it as we get the ADT or census or workload feed. And that is very dependent on the facility on how often they get it to us, but it's usually pretty quick. And so that's tremendously helpful for the scheduler to kind of keep up with what the census is expecting to do, because sometimes around Thursday or Friday it might start to go down with the expectation, right? And that's the model picking all that up based off of forecast and the historic patterns. So they might still try to staff up from what they're seeing on Monday or Tuesday, but in actuality they probably don't need to. They could probably do with a lighter load on Thursday, Friday if that census is going to be trailing down. You could do large-scale adjustments, additions, or adjustments of shifts. You can do large-scale deletion of shifts, which we don't recommend. Usually we take that option away from a lot of the users. And then there's some other reporting. And then here's the automation with the agency. The whole system right here is drag and drop. If I were to drag an employee from one shift to another, they would just get scheduled over to the other one. If this is already a published schedule, they would also get a notification for that. I can swap users, so if I were to drag Green over Andrade there, they would simply swap after the load. If I were to move, let's say, a extender, right, which has less capability than an RN in this environment, if I move them to the RN, I'll get an error saying, hey, that person can't work as an RN. But if I were to move Hammond over to an extender, I might get a warning saying, are you sure you want to do that? You want an RN to work as a tech, or an extender in this case, and you could choose to override it in that example. And that's going back to the substitutions I had talked about earlier. Okay, so that is, let's see, other visuals. If you can't drag and drop, you can always right click on something, right? I can go to the person's profile, I can unassign them, I can edit the shift, give them time off, swap, apply those tags. Same with the demand. If I go over to the demand, I can manually assign someone, adjust the shift. I could split the shift. Let's say you found someone to work 8 of the 12 hours, so you can split it, give them the 8, and then the 4 remains open, right? Easy way to do that. There's also a shift audit, so you can see all the historic details that went into any changes on that particular date. And the other cool option up here is something I'll show you. Let's go back down to someone with some scheduled shifts. Kyoki. All right, so you can highlight them. I could also select this, and then anytime I tap on demand, it will add them to the shift. So if you have to add someone to 12 shifts, very quick way to do it. If you need to visually see 2 or 3 people's schedule, great way to do that. The color options are limitless, but if you select too many people, obviously you get like 4 shades of blue or green or red, and that becomes a little bit harder to use. All right, let me go on to another view, schedule by day. Okay, so we look here. This is an example of if you're within the 24 or 48 hours of the schedule the actual shift occurring, you're going to probably want to look at something like this. You can stack as many units or facilities as you want here, and this is where you're solidifying the day in question, right? Or tonight shift or tomorrow's day shift, and you can move again same way, drag and drop people around. If people can't work certain shifts, you'll get an error. But this is where you would do it. And it's really a nice way to see the whole facility or multiple facilities at one time, keep up with the total amount of misalignment that you have going on, and really try to refine the shift. It's a good view for that. The last view I won't go into is schedule by period. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It's just basically instead of looking at the schedule by date, you're actually looking at it by employee. So the employees show up, you can see all their scheduled shifts as the rows, and then each column is the date, right? So it shows you the shift. It just, I like to schedule by calendar usually. There is some merit to schedule by period, particularly after you create a schedule and before you publish it. That's a good way to look at people's schedules, just do like a final audit, make sure people aren't working 5 shifts in a row or something like that. There's advantages to that. All right, so now I will go to profile. So again, there are all right, sorry if you lost me for a second. My headset needed to get plugged in. What I was saying is there are surveys that we ask the staff of. This could be based off of the schedule that was put out. How much do they like it, right? Usually happy faces, medium face, and then a sad face. They could also provide comments if they need to. That's all usable information. Again, outside of wanting to reduce the misalignment, we also want the staff to like their schedule. It should be better than the schedules that were created before Optime. There's also reporting that we can show them, and then there's formal surveys that could be conducted as well. In the employee management, this is the profile section. Let me go into one of these users. We have basic information, their employee ID, phone number, email, primary unit. You can store all your certifications and licenses here. If you don't want to, and you have your own HRIS system, we can use a feed of HRIS and plug it in here. It is important to have the information here so that if they are expiring on their license or a particular certification that doesn't allow them to work in a unit, we need to know that for the scheduling, right? But we don't have to control it. It doesn't have to be the law in the system, but we need a feed from HRIS to keep up with it. And all that's stored there in certifications and licenses. The other good thing about that is as they come up for expiration, we can send them push notifications, emails, etc. to say, hey, your RN license is expiring at the end of May. Please get it updated and send into HR. There's also capabilities. Capabilities is a good one. So some people absolutely love this is like, for instance, charge. Okay, so you can set when you create the schedule certain criteria of every shift, maybe you need to have at least one charge nurse on. And other units like ICU, maybe they do open hearts and they need to make sure they have at least 2 open heart nurses on, right? You could set the capability so that that criteria is met, even if it sacrifices the amount of misalignment because of all these variables going into the schedule. But what you could also do is set the threshold of how capable someone is. So this person is a 2-star charge. They don't see this value. Nobody can see this value unless they are a manager or an administrator in here. It's important that they don't see it because that would make some people they wouldn't like the score probably if they saw it. But this is good to know because in this case, Natalie will never be scheduled to be charge unless there is a very bare bones need for her to be the charge nurse, right? Maybe a lot of people are on leaves or whatever, and then she could fill in a pinch, but she isn't the normal charge person. So that's a great thing that we do with the star system. Positions, that goes in like what shifts they're working, and schedule preferences is the big one. So here's where we can define their weekend, their holiday groups, how many days in a row they want to work. When they do their preferences, can they put in rotations, meaning can they tell us when they would want to work, if they're primarily day shift, when they would want to work maybe a night shift on a particular date, and the schedule model again picks that up. We can also allow them to put in overtime. It doesn't necessarily give them the overtime, but if there is a huge need because we have little supply and a lot of demand, and people are putting in overtime shifts and it doesn't break any of the hard rules that we have, why not schedule them ahead of time? Again, this has to pass the manager's audit and all that stuff as to if they're going to allow that, but it is possible. You could also set what type of weekend rotation. So some people are on like a every 2 week rotation for a weekend. Some are on every 3 or 4. You could specify that. And then in the end, even though we call it a preference, there are some units that want certain staff members or all the staff members to be on fixed shifts, which is basically they are declaring their schedule, and then the model will run off of that fixed shifts system. And when the schedule comes out, they can modify it afterwards. And that is perfectly doable. We don't necessarily recommend it because it kind of loses out on some of the model pieces that we put into this, but it is, certainly something that happens for certain units, and it is perfectly fine for them to get set up. All right, let me. Okay, it's going to give me an error because I didn't fill in the required information, but that's okay. Let me just go back to it. I want to show you this person's login. Okay, before I get out of there, let me think of anything else around the operations that is of importance. So other things that they can do up here, we have this question mark. So on certain pages, actually this is more relevant for the employees login, but there are other things that we can do. So we can send messages to the staff. I can also do a roster. I could set filters, pump the filters over to the roster so that a group of people get selected, and then I can send all those people a text message or a push notification or whatever it happens to be. Additionally, when we log in to a user's profile account, we could set up like a banner, right? So let's say you want preferences to be due next Friday. You could set a banner, and you could set the start and the end time so that every time they log in, they will see that banner stream across the top of their login, and they know, right, without you sending them a text message or a push notification or whatever, that they need to get their preferences in. You could also do the text and push, but it's just another option to get communication out to the staff. All right, so let me log in now as, the employee here. All right, so I have the schedule starting here in May, and if I were to tap on, if I go to next month, it'll tell me all their work shifts. Next week probably won't give me, oh yeah, so next week we still have some work shifts. Now, to the user, right, it's a little bit more simplified view, but it just lets them keep up with everything that they would care about. If they have any time off requests, they would show up here. They could also perform the actions on them. If they have any swap requests with other staff members, those would show up here, and they could perform the operation to continue the request, right? So basically for a swap request, meaning two people on a swap shifts in usually the same week, both parties need to agree to it, and then usually the manager needs to agree to it. And then finally we have unit needs. I think there was one unit need in this week. I probably can't find it. That's okay. But any unit needs, these are the extra shifts, right? The two-way VMS setup where we have more demand than we have supply. They show up here, and again, the person can follow the process through that landscape as well. There is a whole other view for them to see their schedule. They could go here. Usually we set it up so that they could do nearly everything from that front page. They really shouldn't have to get more into their site, but they certainly can. Okay, so these are all the scheduled shifts. If I highlight it, again, I could ask for time off. I could perform an action of swap or time off on this. Time off isn't on a per shift basis either. It can be, but you could set it up for I want 2 weeks off. So that's where they can keep up with that. Additionally, in their app and here, they have a share calendar. If I were to tap on that, it'll give you instructions to link your work schedule to your personal calendar, and it stays synced, right? It stays up to date. That's important for the staff because they typically want to work from one calendar, right? Not multiple calendars. If they have the option, full schedule will show them the whole schedule for the unit, not just their own schedule. So that is an option there. And what you've seen probably in all the modules is there are set filters. This only has two. The other ones had more in the management login. But basically, you can go through, you can dissect out to different units, different shifts, different job types, different statuses to find the staff that you're looking for. If you don't want, or you could just type in their name if you want as well. One thing I didn't go over is the time off calendar. So this is a great feature. Think summer vacations. This is typically the biggest use case for it. This brings up a calendar grid, and if I am an employee and let's say I don't have much seniority or however they typically give time off for summer vacations, again, that it's highly dependent on the facility and the unit, but let's say it goes by seniority and I don't have much seniority. I can look at the time off calendar and it will tell me other people that work my shift that are part of my job scale in my unit that have already asked for time off, right? So if I see that the week of the 4th here has 4 people off and the week of the 11th doesn't have anybody that asked for time off yet, and I have a cruise that has adjusted dates, right? I could be pretty confident in being able to get the week of the 11th rather than the week of the 4th off, and I could try to change my plans around that. Again, thinking long term, like this is 4 or 5 months out. So that is where it becomes largely valuable instead of everybody coming to the manager asking who has time off. It's all very apparent. There's also another option that we can turn on that tells you who has time off, like the actual names. We usually don't turn that on because it ends up being, some poor situations come up. People get mad that other people got time off even though they got it in late or whatever it is, and that becomes a whole thing. I can also see a repository of all my time off requests, swap requests by or to me, my swap preferences, and any availabilities that I signed up. And the last thing I'll show you here is the employee preferences. So again, you can create fixed schedules, but what we like to do is allow the user to go in and through these colored actions, right? I could select it and I can go and change things. I could get rid of it if I want. Okay, I could say like off day. They can go and give their preference, and if the majority of the staff do this, when we run the model, we know all the demand, we know where they want to work as highly preferred. We know that if they can't work the highly preferred because of certain situations, then we know which days they prefer as opposed to the not preferred or the day off, right? All of this is customizable, so you can give no days off to people except for their off weekends, right? Or their off holidays. Or you can give them 1 or 2 per schedule, right? Or you could give them one a week, right? And that's all customizable. So they can go and set this. Then when we run the schedule, it knows all the employee preferences. It knows all of our demand in the model. The model picks all this up and it tries to create the most perfect schedule that the employee would like and that reduces the misalignment as much as possible. Okay. They can also set up a recurrence for this. So if they want to recur every 2 or 3 weeks, they could set that up, set it to expire at the end of December or in 5 years from now, and then it will automatically plug it in here. That's what I've already done for this user as I go forward. All right, it's already there, and people can use that if they always know that they want to work the Tuesday, Wednesday after their weekend of work and be off the Thursday, Friday before their weekend of work, right? Something like that. They can set it and forget it, and their preferences are at least saved, and then they can go and make edits if they want, like I'm doing here. I believe that's pretty much it. If you have any other questions, I am always available. Thanks.